This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download recap is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. Now, let's get into this week's news. First up, Discovery gets a new map. This week, I've got two pieces of Sounds Profitable research in the conversation. Data for everyone. First up, the Podcast Discovery Playbook 2026, co-published with JAR Podcast Solutions, found that 61% of podcast listeners discover their favorite shows through YouTube and social media combined, with YouTube alone accounting for 40% of discoveries, more than double any other single source. TikTok-driven discovery is nearly 7 times more common among listeners aged 18 to 34 than those 55 and over. The strategies the industry funds first, trailers at 3% and podcast ads at 4%, are the ones listeners credit last. Continuing that train of thought, Tom Webster's A New Map for Podcasting article uses data from the upcoming report, The Podcast Atlas, which he will debut part of at VidCon this week. The central argument of the piece: the unit of discovery for younger listeners is a vertical clip made by a platform-native creator, not a trailer. Spotify discovered listeners post a net brand receptivity score of 58, and TikTok discovered listeners score 52, both well above the all-listener baseline of 35, meaning the channels that reach the youngest audiences also reach the most commercially engaged ones. Tom Webster recommends funding ongoing vertical programs rather than launch week stunts for shows targeting under 35s. Here's a quote from the article, quote, "Half of podcast consumers went looking for a new show in the last month, and 3/4 of the people finishing a limited series go hunting for a replacement. People are shopping for the next thing all the time, which means a vertical presence is not a stunt you run at release and switch off. It's a habit you keep," end quote. The full Podcast Atlas study gets its debut in a webinar July 1st, that's next Wednesday, at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Registration available at a link in the show notes. Two takes from industry heads. It's another busy week for Sounds Profitable. A second two, has joined the newsletter. This week, we've got 2 new industry insights on Sounds Profitable's thought leadership section. First up, Mattia, Verzella, VP of Programmatic Partnerships at Triton Digital, published Building a Revenue-Driven Audio Marketplace for Publishers, arguing that evaluating ad revenue through CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, comparison across channels misleads publishers because each demand type serves a structurally different role. Programmatic provides volume and liquidity during unsold periods. Direct sales reflect advertiser commitment to content value. Using anonymized publisher data, Verzella illustrates that what he calls the triangle of sadness, incredible name, raising floor CPMs can collapse fill rates and total revenue, while incremental reductions restore both. Meanwhile, Richard Fawal, founder and CEO of Voxtopica, published The Podcasters Our Industry Forgets, arguing that mission-driven podcasters at nonprofits, universities, government agencies, and advocacy organizations do skilled work under distinct constraints the industry has no framework to support. Their value does not map onto downloads or CPMs. A public health podcast reaching 4,000 clinicians who change prescribing practices delivers more mission-critical impact than a chart-topping entertainment show. Nonprofit Marketing Guide research finds only 5% of nonprofit communicators report their roles are well understood by colleagues. The wall calls for research, pricing, and professional recognition that treat mission-driven producers as peers. Looking at audio's ad effectiveness. The YouGov U.S. Podcast Advertising Report 2026 offered what might be the week's most counterintuitive data point. Podcast ads are simultaneously the most skipped and least annoying format. 52% of podcast listeners usually skip or tune out, yet only 25% rank them as the most annoying format, compared to 50% for display and 46% for video platforms. The conversion story is stronger than skip rate suggests. 60% of podcast consumers have taken some action after hearing a podcast ad, and 55% of habitual skippers have converted at least once. Trust sits at 14%, below TV at 19, radio at 19, but distrust is comparatively low at 38%, well below video platforms 48%, display advertising's 57%, and social media's 63%. Sounds Profitable and Veritonic this week launched a free preview of Veritonic Instant Insights, a tool that evaluates audio and video ad creative before launch and returns awareness and intent signals across podcast, YouTube, CTV, social, and streaming, benchmarked against more than a decade of testing data. Here's a quote from Sounds Profitable's Brian Barletta. Quote, "The line between video and audio continues to blur, and the one area we're not seeing enough attention on is providing support for identifying what video creatives are good enough to be listened to. The solutions for video podcasting that are catching the most attention allow dynamic switching between watching and listening, which means that the ads served in them have to hit the mark no matter how they're consumed." End quote. Something Veritonic has delivered. Here's a quote from CEO Scott Simonelli. Quote, "From testing whether a video ad's audio can stand on its own to uncovering broader creative intelligence, Instant Insights delivers answers in minutes, not weeks." End quote. Now it's time for quick hits. These are articles that didn't fit into the top story section of today's issue, but are worth including in your weekend reading. First up, speaker submissions for Podcast Movement New York City close in less than 1 week. You can get your pitch in by June 30th to be in the running. PRX welcomes 3 new board members. That's Cynthia King-Vance, John Kenny, and Michael Kleeman. Podscribe is now an approved measurement partner on Amazon Ads DSP, with incrementality measurement coming soon. And Pave Studios has partnered with Supporting Cast to power premium subscriptions for their Crime House brand. That was the download brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know I went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on the download section of soundsprofitable.com. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, Molly DeMillier, and Tom Webster. Special thanks, as always, to you for sticking with me as I brought you all the top stories you might have missed from this week in the business of podcasting. Robot.
Download complete.